Ladies and gentlemen, America is trying to distance itself from what is happening in Ukraine. Biden, he sends in weapons, but he refuses steadfastly to even think of sending in anything more. Imposes sanctions but refuses any concrete action, distances himself, ladies and gentlemen. But the Ukraine fallout is in many ways is a result of the West's interference. So how can they not intervene now? What about the money they are making? What about the wealth they will amass at the cost of the Ukrainians? Let's debate.
Ukrainians are gallantly fighting with the Russian military.
The Russian troops, they are basically increasing their offensive by bringing in what they call the battalion tactical groups. Now, what exactly are battalion tactical groups? They are essentially the specialized force or the troops that were at the borders. Now, they have basically entered. 16 to 17 such BTGs have already been brought inside the Ukrainian territory.
Ординаторская дверь вертолетом.
The United States claims it will not engage in the conflict.
Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East.
The fact remains that it is a belligerent America that interfered in Eastern Europe and enabled effective military encirclement of Russia.
Putin cited the interference of the West as the very reason for putting its forces on alert.
Уважаемые коллеги, вы видите, что западные страны предпринимают не только недружественные действия в отношении нашей страны в экономической сфере, я имею в виду нелегитимные санкции, о которых все хорошо знают, но высшие должностные лица ведущих стран НАТО допускают и агрессивные высказывания в адрес нашей страны. Поэтому
Many are saying that America cannot look the other way. They cannot shoot from the shoulders of innocent Ukrainians, and half-hearted sanctions perhaps will not have any impact on the ground.
Or the bigger question is America not acting because it is the biggest winner from the war? From defense companies to gas companies, is everyone in America benefiting from a war 6,000 miles away? Let's debate.
First, to get a sense as air sirens go across most cities in Ukraine, I'm joined by Shravan and Mridul. Shravan, what appears to be the mood on the ground, across Ukraine, and what is the apprehension about Russia's next military step among people you meet?
Well, in fact, Arnab, let me start with the latest development from where we've been broadcasting from. A short while back, we heard the air raid alerts resulting in the team going into a bunker. Now, that's pretty much the scenario in almost every city. Now, let's just take a quick update from starting from Kharkiv, which has been completely pounded. While on the one hand, Russia has been claiming that they have been able to gather more steam on the ground. They've been able to capture Kharkiv. That has been completely dismissed by the Ukrainian side. Now, with regards to the offensive from the Russian side, we've seen that they've amped it up. You have the battalion tactical groups that are already inside the Ukrainian territory. We're talking about 17 such specialized units that have been brought in, which only indicates that the ground offensive, as far as the Russian troops are concerned, that has only increased. All of that basically moving towards the Polotsk direction, which is towards Kiev. So the focus right now, apart from Kharkiv, is certainly ensuring that Kiev is taken into control. But with regards to the Ukrainian side, remember what has really happened right now. We've clocked in more than 1,000 kilometers starting from the eastern side, meeting a lot of people, speaking to our sources within the Defense Ministry. Almost everyone has been indicating one thing, that they are going to try their level best to ensure that Kyiv is completely safeguarded, even though we have seen right now that maternity hospitals, civilian areas, all have now come under target. We've got some pictures from various cities. Zhytomyr region, that becomes the other place which is recently, just about short while ago, where there was a missile attack that took place. In Kharkiv also, we're being told that there's been continuous shelling that's been going on. Some areas which were completely untouched about 48 hours ago, they too have now been targeted. Towards the west, we're being told that there have been more air raid alerts that are taking place, only indicating that there is a move, or rather an advancement that is being made by the Russian troops. One big problem that the Ukrainians still face is some sort of a air defense system to be in place to protect them from the aerial bombing. That remains the one big weak point as far as Ukrainians are concerned. They're putting up numbers. For instance, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry says that over 5,000 Russian troops have been killed in action. Over 30 to 40 aircrafts of Russia have been brought down by the Ukrainian side. They are certainly putting up a stiff resistance. There is a massive pushback also. We have spoken to a lot of locals. In fact, this morning, when Mridul and myself, we were carrying on with our broadcast, that is the time when a lot of locals have come up and said that, look here, we are not engaging in this war. It is Russia who started. We are looking forward to the peace talks to take place, but it totally depends on how Russia responds.
Absolutely. I'd like to go across to Brest at the talks venue. We have our defense correspondent Shivani live with us. We saw pictures of the Russians reaching the talks venue. What about the Ukrainians in the given context? Any clarity that you have?
Arnab, we are the only Indian channel, in fact, only global channel to be present at this venue where the talks have to take place. And we've also seen how the Russian convoy was seen moving towards the place. The Ukrainians had said that they are ready to talk, but without any preconditions. But still, there is a lot of suspense on what's happening inside. What are the talks taking place? But certainly, the talks have to take place today after a gap of 2 days. Though we saw in the first round of talks that continued for almost 5 hours, there wasn't a major breakthrough in these talks. And again, contradictory to what Russia said. Russia said that it will take place in the dialogue. It has been aggravating its attacks throughout the cities of Kharkiv and Kyiv. And today also, when we saw the convoy moving for the talks venue, we have seen simultaneously there have been air raid sirens in Ukraine. So what is the messaging being done by Russia is just not clear. Ukraine says we will take part in the talks, but as of now there's not much input, not much confirmation that has the delegation arrived. Have they started meeting? Have the talks been taken on the table? But yes, all eyes are on these talks because they will decide the future of Ukraine and the war that's going on. Will there be a truce, or the war will keep on going as it has been seeing a lot of devastation in last 7 days? But certainly, we have to wait and watch because the talks have already been delayed. It was being said that they will take place on Wednesday afternoon, but it's been quite long. The wait has been quite long. The convoy has been seen of the Russians, but still a suspense hovers around these talks. That has the talk taken place, or are the people have they already started talking? But certainly we have seen a contradiction from the statements of Russia that had admitted and that says that it wants dialogue, and on ground it is contrarily attacking the cities aggressively. Back to you, Arnab.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Shivani. We are getting some reports now that the Ukrainian delegation could arrive maybe tomorrow. So it appears to have been delayed a bit. But the Russians insist the talks will still happen. They say ceasefire is on the agenda. But that could also be part of their propaganda. So the focus, in a way, globally, the focus now will be next couple of days on Belarus. Belarus will be where the focus will be, on whether there can be a breakthrough. And Belarus has also got dragged into the conflict. It tried not to, but it's very much there. Thank you, Shivani, Mridul, and Shravan. And joining us now, we have Dov Zakheim joining us from Washington, D.C., former Undersecretary of Defense in the George Bush administration. We have Mark Mirowitz, professor at the State University of New York, Maritime College, live from New York. Elizabeth Braw, Senior Fellow with the American Enterprise Institute from London. Bohdan Nahalo, Chief Editor of the Kiev Post, joining us tonight. Very, very senior journalist, very opinionated on this subject, like most Ukrainians are. And Tariq Fateh is a well-known author and analyst joining us from Canada. Hussein Olupinar is the academic advisor at the Foreign Policy Institute in Ankara, Turkey. Mark Sleboda, on the other side of the screen there, is international relations and security analyst from Moscow. And my last guest tonight is Omer Anas, who's at the Ankara Yildirim Beyazit University in Ankara. He's an expert of Middle Eastern affairs. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Now, Dov, the Americans are going to make a lot of money out of this war. A lot of money. And all the defense stocks of all the American companies have gone through the roof. Billions. Billions. Lockheed Martin, 14.11, 23.5 last 6 months, stock going up. General Dynamics, massive rise. Northrop Grumman stock, massive rise. The entire defense industry is having the time of its life in America. Now, don't tell me, Dov, that this doesn't matter. Because the Americans are going to make a lot of money. Can you hear me, Dov?
Barely hear you.
Mark.
No, I can hear you now.
Okay. All right. So I'll repeat. So did you hear my question? My question was simple. My point is that the entire American establishment is going to make a lot of money out of this war.
That's absolute nonsense. And let me tell you why, if you can hear me.
It's not nonsense.
First
it's
of
true.
all,
It's true. It's not a coincidence.
India,
No. You tell me. 1 minute.
No,
1 minute,
come on.
Dov, listen. Dov, listen. Dov, listen.
No,
Dov,
you listen.
Dov, you can say, come on, but you got to hear me.
Question.
No. Why don't you listen to this? Why does it hurt you when I say that?
This is a conspiracy
theory. Then you said you didn't.
And
that's why I'm repeating
annoyed
it.
About it. Look, the values of the stocks have gone up for over 2 years, number one. Number two, they went up before all of this. If you look at the stock market today, it's actually been going down, number one. Number two, this whole idea, for India and somebody from India to talk about the United States when we're providing weapons, we're providing support, we're organizing the world to condemn this invasion, and India is being neutral about it and has yet to condemn the invasion. I think it's an absolute outrage. The Russians are aggressors. We, the United States, have organized sanctions that are already hurting them. Look at the drop in the ruble. Look at the stock market that hasn't even opened. That's not to mention the people that are coming back in body bags because of American and Western weapons that have been shooting down aircraft, shooting at tanks, shooting at personnel carriers.
Dov.
Arnab, Most of the
Yeah,
time,
Dove.
you ask really good
Dove.
questions, but somebody's feeding you nonsense.
Yeah. Now, Dove, I'll tell you something, Dove. Nobody feeds me anything.
Can't hear you.
But you're not being able to handle it. And I'll tell you why. You're not being able to handle it. Because you were, and Dove, listen to me, you were former Undersecretary of Defense during the Iraq War, in the George W. Bush administration. The fact of the matter is, Dove, you're telling me, why doesn't anybody in the American media ask you that question? Why doesn't the American media ask the American people that question, that are we making billions and trillions at the cost of Ukrainian lives? What's wrong with that question? I said the Ukrainians are brave. But you are making a lot of money, and you will make a lot of money. You said the stock prices have gone up over the years. Well, I'm sorry, Lockheed Martin saw a 12.28% increase in its stocks in the last 5 days. In the last 5 days. Now count that in billions.
That's got nothing to do with
who died,
Ukraine.
and count how much money Lockheed Martin stands to gain. You don't want to answer that question.
Oh, I'll answer you. The reason the stocks have gone up.
I don't like the question you're asking me tonight. But don't tell me I'm wrong, because I'm not.
You are wrong. The reason the stocks have gone up is because the defense budget is finally going to pass. It's got nothing to do with Ukraine. Absolutely nothing.
Ah, right. Is that so? Is that so?
You're creating a conspiracy
Is that
theory.
so? I'd like Tariq Fateh to open the debate. Let's get Tariq in.
Stop talking about the United States and answer
you're
yourself,
making money.
where
India's
is
not
your
making money
country?
out of the war. You don't like the question at all tonight. You don't like the question at all tonight, Dove. Accept it.
We're not making money.
You don't like my question tonight. Is it of course you're making money. You made money out of the Second World War, admitted, Dove. You made money out of the Second World War, and you were the ones who dropped the bomb as well. It's a fantastic question. It's a relevant question. It's a question Dov Zakim is not being able to handle tonight. And it's a question every American should ask themselves. Tariq Fateh responding from Toronto. Tariq is on the debate. Tariq is on the debate. Tariq.
If you can hear me, I'm not too sure. But hello, can someone tell me that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can all hear you.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, okay. Here's the point to my American friends.
Once had a president called Eisenhower.
His last 10-minute address should be compulsory for you. 10-minute address. It is not the billionaires of Moscow who run the show. It is you people in Washington, D.C. who are the slaves. Sometimes you get defeated by the Taliban, very conveniently end up somewhere else. And today, there was only one issue in this war, that Russia did not want Ukraine to be a member of NATO. But you, sir, being on the other side of the Atlantic, you want to be in the middle of everything else. Whether it is Libya, whether it is Afghanistan, whether it is Vietnam, you have absolutely no shame after being defeated by everyone and his uncle. Yet now you have to portray, and already we know he's a dictator, we know he shouldn't have invaded, but you let the invasion in. You created the conditions whereby you can sell your damn tanks. By now you've sold, what, about 2,000 tanks in the military? Your military-industrial complex would be bankrupt if you didn't have a war. And now you have people, black people being beaten up, Indians being assaulted because, oh, it's not the blonde and the blue-eyed refugee that everyone else is looking for. One day, a time will come.
And I'm being told tonight,
you will have to face, or your children will have to face the future. And you will understand how many people, what is on your hand.
Yeah. And I'm being told tonight, Arnab, you're asking a terrible question. And to the people of the United States of America, please someone, your media has lied to you. Your media doesn't ask any questions anymore. Your media has no credibility anywhere in the world. You say Fox doesn't have credibility in the United States of America? Well, CNN has no credibility on any part of this planet anymore, because that's a question they won't ask. And my friend Dov Zakim got all very into a rage when I asked him the question that America loves the war because it's making money. But I know that Professor Mark Merowitz will agree with me, because the Wall Street Journal says, Mark, Ukraine crisis stokes defense company shares. I'm being told it's a wrong question. But it's the right question. Wall Street's top analysts are picking these 7 defense contractors as stocks to buy, with 2 offering potential returns of 20%. These are your headlines. You're salivating. There are people in America salivating at the war. And while I admire the bravery of the Ukrainian people, I say to them, please consider, I know, Bodhan, you don't like the question, consider that the Americans will prolong your agony and will make tons of money off it. Tons of money off it. And that's a question you should also be asking. Do you agree with me, Mark? Mark, do you agree with me?
No, I don't. And I agree with Dov Zakheim, and I will tell you why. Okay. Yes, the point you raised is important. Okay. Yes, but the problem here falls squarely on the crimes against humanity committed by Russia against innocent civilians, and that is the main issue right now. Now, maybe there are other issues floating around, but we have to stop the carnage and murder of killing little children in orphanages and killing people willy-nilly. Civilians, innocent people are being killed by the Russians in a way that is reminiscent of Hitler in World War II. You hear this, the crying out of the Ukrainian people. Now, there's certainly lots of issues. And by the way, the Wall Street Journal is not, I read the Wall Street Journal, I enjoy it, but that isn't the be-all and end-all of everything. I listen to my president, President Biden, who said that President Putin has crossed the line, has done something very wrong. And I think that the Europeans agree with that. And I have to say that, and I don't want to inflame you any more than you are already, you seem very excitable about this, but I was very surprised that among all the nations that supported the resolution in the UN, it was India that 3 times has already abstained in the UN. And you can't abstain when you see little children killed, women and children murdered using cluster bombs. This is a violation of all principles of normal behavior. And frankly, I think, I mean, I'm no expert on this, but I'm sure that India cried out to the world when it fought wars with Pakistan and said about the world, why don't you listen to us about how we're suffering?
No.
I'm not saying,
I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you. No, let me correct you on that. Mark, I'll tell you one thing. I'm not excitable on this at all. I'm not excitable on this at all. In fact, I think I'm the cool one tonight. I think Dov got excitable and you're supporting him. I think I'm very cool tonight because I'm asking a straight question and you tell me about children who are dying. Of course, children are dying, but does America care? No. It says these stocks will increase. This is surging. I'll tell you, you say Wall Street Journal. Of course, I'm not saying that the Wall Street Journal is the last word. I don't think anyone in the American media is the last word. But you're very happy because your dollar is being strengthened. Because your defense contractors and manufacturers will be the first to profit from a supply of weapons at an increased pace. Am I factually wrong? Just tell me, Arnab, no, you're wrong. The defense contractors from America, the defense establishment will not make money. Don't tell me it's an irrelevant question. And the UN has just voted on Russia. I'm going across to the UN. I'm going across to the UN, ladies and gentlemen. I'm getting a vote there. 1 minute.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor, 141, against 5, abstentions 35. Draft Resolution A/ES-11/L1 is adopted. Before giving the floor for explanations of vote after the vote, may I remind delegations that explanations of vote are limited to 10 minutes and should be made by delegations from their seats. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Tunisia.
I'd like to go back to the debate right now. The countries will give their explanations. The vote is 141 for, stopping Russian aggression, 5 against, and 35 abstentions. I don't know why what it is about my question that got everyone so excited. Let me get a view in from Mark here tonight. None of this, of course, justifies what you're doing. Mark, the continued, and that question is to Mark Sleboda, the continued assault on civilians across Ukraine, the bombing of residential areas, the bombing of hospitals. You cannot be in denial about this anymore. And Mark Sleboda, the fact is, it's not even getting you a military victory. Mark. We'll have Mark and Bodan. Yeah,
Russia's, yes, for Russia's military intervention in Ukraine, they are, of course, not targeting civilian buildings. That is absurd. I don't believe that any more than I believe that when the U.S. invaded Iraq, Libya, Syria, and Afghanistan, that they targeted civilian buildings. And I say that as a U.S. military veteran who regrets his service. There are collateral damage in every military conflict. But even the best U.S. military analysts on the subject, like Michael Kaufman at the Center for National Security, and Rob Lee, a fellow at Alpha, have said that Russia has gone out of their way to avoid not only civilian casualties, but Ukrainian military casualties to such an extent that it has impeded their intervention. And that is because they do not view themselves as war with the Ukrainian people. In fact, they went in to protect the Ukrainian people of East Ukraine, who have been under assault by the regime that seized power with the help of the United States in 2014 and have been shelled for 8 long, bloody years. Why was there not the concern about the women and children of Donbass? Are they somehow less human beings than others? I don't understand that. Russia went in to protect Ukrainians from the Ukrainian government as well as their own national security concerns.
You're not being welcome. You're not being welcome. You're not being welcome. And I'd like Bodan to respond to you, please. Bodan is responding to you. Sorry to cut you short there, Mark, but Bodan has been restlessly raising his hand. I'd like to hear a response, please. Bodan.
Yes. Yes. Restless, Arnab, we know each other well enough now. Listen, you've got an American traitor speaking from Moscow as a Russian. Why don't you have a Russian Democrat speaking, giving us the line from ordinary Russians, not an American traitor being paid in Moscow? Secondly,
I'm sorry, did you call me a traitor, sir? Did you call me a traitor?
Please tell us before the end of the program. If did India, I did.
A traitor.
I called you a traitor, an American in Moscow speaking on behalf of Russia. Go back to America.
I have committed so many thought crimes,
Listen,
so many acts of political dissent against U.S. foreign policy that you, sir, would be shocked.
How did India vote today? Look, shut up. We don't want to hear you. We don't want to hear you. You've had your say. Let somebody else say. You're not on our feet now. Now, we'd like to know what India did. Now, Arnab, the problem with your program is you ask questions. You're not an anchorman. You're a propagandist yourself. You think you're very smart and very clever, but in fact, you have very low intelligence. You like the sound of your own voice. Let other people speak and try to get a more balanced audience. Don't get Russian American traders speaking on behalf of anti-Western lines for Russia. Get real Russians. He's not a real Russian. Who the hell is he? You know, sitting in Moscow on Putin's table when they are killing our people. You know, I'm ashamed that on your program in Indian democracy, you have an American traitor speaking on behalf of Russia. Come on, this is not. Now, in the meantime, the Ukrainian people are fighting back. And ask your Indian students, one of whom was killed by Russian missiles yesterday in Kharkiv, ask them what they see on the ground. And I will tell you that they are fully behind the Ukrainian people. And Arnab, you did make a good point. The Russian-speaking Ukrainians and ethnic Russians in Eastern Europe are not welcoming the Ukrainians. Not one town city has welcomed the Russians. They are coming out en masse in the so-called liberated towns with Ukrainian flags, telling the invaders to F off because they are barbarians, war criminals, and they will be cursed like Hitler was. This man sitting there representing Russia, sorry, an American, will also be cursed because he's a Goebbels. He's a modern-day Goebbels. And you should know that, Indians. You're a democracy, country of Mahatma Gandhi, etc. Either you're on the side of the victims of this naked aggression with barbaric methods, destruction of cities, etc., or you're fence-sitters and waiting until China or Pakistan invades you and they cry help, help. So everyone, I will say to you, such defense in India. You didn't give a damn about anybody, and you were buying weapons from Russia all this time. You know, so that's the bottom line. You're either on the side of humanity, democracy, the rules of international law and the United Nations, or you're a law unto yourselves and you just do whatever is convenient for you. And I would ask you, sir, as the moderator, to be fairer, to be class. We don't want your opinion. The Indian public knows your opinion. Give us a chance to speak. You know, however clever you may be.
Thank you, Bodan. I am raising the issue of what may happen at the talks right now. Now, as far as what is happening on the ground, Bodan, I like you too. But well before I got to know you or you started coming on my program, this channel has taken the most strident and strong position against the suffering of the Ukrainian people. We have reported from across Ukraine. So I'm not talking from the studios. Let me tell you. My reporters have been in Kharkiv, have been in Kiev, have been in Lviv. We have given the entire side of the Ukrainian people, minute to minute, every video, right? That today the Russians and their propaganda establishment will not show to the world is being shown on the Republic Media Network. I can also tell you today that whether it is Americans or Russians, they're watching this channel and saying, at least for the first time, we're not getting a stilted perspective. And I know, Bodan, you're a senior journalist, I respect you. You've got far more experience than me. I will not speak back to you, Bodan. But you know, I am only asking the questions relevant to both sides tonight. But I am on the side of the Ukrainian people and the suffering that they are going through. I have been and I will continue to be. Have no doubt on that, my friend. But in terms of reality, since I have geostrategic experts on that program, my questions are not popular. I know Dove hates me tonight for the question I asked him, but he will think about it. And I want to ask Elizabeth Bro, and I want to ask Omar and us, and who. Well, thank you. I'm not sure Americans will like the question I asked, but it has to be asked. You know, but my question is tonight. Now, what if the talks fail? My concern is tonight, and Hussein will understand it. Hussein, can you hear me? He's from the Foreign Policy Institute of Ankara. He's joining us from Sweden tonight. My concern is, what if these talks, which are delayed till tomorrow, don't work? Will the Russian military advance continue? Is that not a point of concern? What lever does Zelensky really have?
Okay, thank you. There are four main conditions that Vladimir Putin is looking for to satisfy himself with. First one, Ukraine says no to NATO, that it will never ever be a NATO member. Second, Ukraine recognizes the annexation of Crimea and recognizes Crimea as part of Russia. Third condition, Ukrainian government recognizes the breakaway republics, so-called republics in Donbass, which are recently recognized by the Russian government as independent entities, that Ukraine will recognize them as independent states. The last one, which is very important, is the fact that Ukrainians have to have a new government, which is Russia-friendly. These are the minimums Vladimir Putin is looking for. And the Ukrainian government, I don't think, is ready to accept any of these conditions at this point. But I earlier argued somewhere else that these negotiations will prolong, and we will see a number of them coming. And the Russian plan is not, in the first place, was to occupy the entire country, but take it part by part, forcing Ukrainian government to come to the table and accept the conditions. The whole out war in Ukraine is too costly for Russia, but it is more important to get the pieces of conditions, which I counted now, on the table. If Russia can force it by use of heavy bombardments and artilleries and damaging the civilian lives and the environment. So this is the conditions and the situations Russia will continue to look for. The Ukrainian government at this point is solid, I believe, and I don't think these negotiations, which will take place today, tonight, or tomorrow, are not going to satisfy the Russian side. I am not seeing that coming. So the war will continue, the occupation will progress. Unfortunately, the humanitarian catastrophe will continue to grow. We are seeing many cities now lacking basic services, and people are lacking food. But the fact that the Russia is using heavy arms and bombardment of cities will hurt the Ukrainian government, and at the face of the costs of civilian lives, the Ukrainian government may feel forced to agree for some of the conditions which I counted. This is what Russia is looking for by destroying the cities.
Is that likely? Elizabeth Bro, is that likely, given the spirited fight of the Ukrainian people so far?
Well, I think the Ukrainians can draw inspiration from the Finns back in 1939 and 1940 when they held off against the Red Army for 105 days. Totally unexpectedly, the Red Army had calculated that the Finns would immediately collapse because they were such a small country. They were a new country. They were supposedly a divided country. They held up for 105 days. We have many days left until 105 days have passed. So I think the Ukrainians can draw inspiration from the Finns. Then another point, though, is that I wonder if we are facing a League of Nations moment. Back in the days of the League of Nations, it proved incapable of solving conflicts. And now, yes, we saw another UN vote, but what does it mean? It's largely symbolic. The UN has proven incapable of solving this conflict, and indeed previous ones, although it can argue, but that it can be argued that this is the most significant conflict to date that the UN has been unable to solve. And if we can't solve conflicts, what is it about? Do we need an overhaul of the United Nations? Do we need a completely new international organization? And what would that look like? We're clearly not in a position to set one up at the moment, but that UN vote looked, I mean, it was clearly in favor of Ukraine, but a feeble notion simply because it's not going to change anything.
Yes.
Because it's not going to change anything.
That is a absolutely relevant question now. The UN is divided. We've gone in another direction, but I'd like Omar to take that. The UN is divided. The UN has not voted unanimously in one direction. It's quite a split vote. 141, 35-5. It's not a split vote. My question to Omar, if the Ukrainians hold out, say let's the Ukrainians hold out for a month, what are the consequences for Moscow? Would they be worried, or would they factored that in?
My understanding is that Ukraine is not in position to hold out, and the kind of aggression which Moscow is taking against Ukraine, I think that it is going to be a very devastating incursion, aggression. But let me say one important thing. Why we should be worried of this Russian aggression at this time? There are two main concerns. One, India is one of the countries which has immensely benefited from its non-alignment policy, and it has created a space for itself with help of Russia and China. If Russia is becoming an aggressor, and if Russia is becoming involved deeply in such kind of blatant action against one small country, then my fear is that the institutions like Shanghai Cooperation Organization and BRICS are going to become very weak. And the world is going to become rather a unipolar world, because popularity of Russia will also go down. And many small countries will be very much afraid with aligning with Russia. So the position of Russia is going to decline. And so India is also going to lose. So in my understanding, the best way to save Indian interest and interest of third world countries and interest of smaller countries is to stop Russia from becoming so much involved in Ukraine and take back its steps. So this is my observation, which I think that it is time for Russia to protect the world order and to protect the interest of smaller countries like African countries and countries like India, of course. In no way India is going to benefit if Russia is going to decline. Of course, after this incursion, Russia is going to decline because Russia is going to face heavy sanctions, and the NATO members and Western countries are not going to leave Russia in like that. So it means that Russia has to pay a price. Whether we, the third world countries, Indians, would like to see Russia decline in the world stage, absolutely not. So it means that Russia must stay there, and Russia must take back its steps and offer something honorable for both sides. And in my understanding, I'm sitting in Ankara. I give this example that if Russia can have good relations with Turkey, a NATO member, if Russia can cooperate with Turkey in Syria, in Azerbaijan, in Libya, why not with Ukraine? So there was enough scope for dialogue, for a negotiated solution. But if you see the kind of speech which Vladimir Putin has given and the kind of discourse in which the foreign minister is involved, they are talking about a civilizational approach for Russia, as if they are going to be another supremacist Russia, which is very much worrying. I think that many countries, they have left behind such legacies. And these kind of political discourses which are coming from Moscow are extremely worrying and frightening. That is why I think that India must discourage, or all other countries must discourage Russia to becoming so much involved in Ukraine.
Well, I think I would only say this. I'm getting guests on the other side. Anyway, Bodhan doesn't like when I speak too much, so I'll keep it very short. But I will say that there's a lot of focus globally on India's role. Maybe because of the size of our economy, our strategic, depth, or maybe just the fact that we are a democracy. But there's no doubt on that. And I'm not running away from that question, Omar, that there will be a great deal of emphasis on what position India takes. In fact, it's the only major power at this scale, which is being pressured to take a side, both by the American Quad bloc and the others, and also by the Russians. Let's not be in denial. I'm not in denial here as an Indian that there is pressure on both sides on India, and I'm sure our government will act in our national interest as well. But this debate is not about India. This debate is not about India. There are talks happening, gentlemen. I think the best thing... No, Bodhan, you're shaking your head. The main focus has to be on getting a ceasefire on the ground. The longer this prolongs under the shadow of a nuclear conflict, we are looking at a situation where the smallest spark, could light a fire. I'm concerned more about the immediate.
Russia has misguided India on this issue. Russia has misguided India because Russia was supposed to take India in confidence on these issues. At least should have given some certain messages that what Russia is going to do. Russia and India have been very close friends for a long time. And such an important decision and such an important action which is going to destabilize the entire world, Russia cannot treat India as if India is nothing. So the way Russia has treated India and China, both India and China, Russia has kept India and China both in dark on this issue, and that is why I think that Russia is going alone.
I'm not sure about the China part. I'm not sure about the China part, but are we not going to discuss what happens if this gets prolonged? Are we not going to discuss that at all, Mark? No? We just want to discuss India? We just don't want to discuss what happens if this gets prolonged for a couple of weeks?
Can I say something?
Yes, please. Mark. Mark wants to go first, Bodhan. Mark. Yes, Mark.
You asking me? I don't remember. I'm not sure. Yes?
But who is Mark?
Yes, Mark. There are two Marks here tonight. Sorry, there are two Marks. Dove wanted to say something, but that was to you, Mark Merowitz. Yes, Professor Mark from New York. Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to pick up on the professor from London. I don't know your name, but I thought the point you made was very important. This is a watershed moment for the United Nations, which has been so ineffective in dealing with this. And why is that? Because can you believe this? Russia was the president of the Security Council. Now that will implode your head, but honestly, it's very appropriate that the president of Ukraine is a comedian, because truth is, this is tragic comedy for the world. The world cries out to understand why the UN, which is supposed to keep peace in the world, is unable to do so. And our colleague talked about the Finns. It's interesting, the Finns, who are under Finlandization, they are now supporting the people in Ukraine. And it is not divided in the UN. In fact, if you looked at the vote in the Security Council, it was 11 votes for supporting, for criticizing and condemning Russia, and 1 vote, which was the veto by Russia. It is unconscionable that Russia, and I'm not just saying it myself, it was said by many of the delegates, including the American delegate to the United Nations Security Council, who said that it was absolutely unacceptable. This discussion today, Arnab, with all due respect, has been a great disappointment to me as an academic and someone who knows a little bit about what's going on here. Maybe I don't know as much as the others, but I can see with just looking at atrocities being committed. And my colleague went through Putin's demands. Ukraine has to recognize the annexation of Crimea. He has to recognize these Luhansk and Donetsk governments. He has to have a new government. It's a free country. It is independent. It has sovereignty. The people decide in a country, not when you have people coming in to destroy and murder and kill, and then you want to sit down and have a negotiation I mean, that is just, honestly, I believe this affects the conscience of humanity. And I wish that my colleagues here would step aside for a moment and try to avoid propaganda, if you don't mind, and speak about truth. What we see that is going on. The world is watching. The world is watching. I listened to my president yesterday in the State of the Union. I agree with what he said. And notice that when he said what he said about Ukraine, all of the senators and congressmen got up, and all of them, Democrats, Republicans, united in the idea that the world shouldn't stand by when someone invades a country which is territorial integrity as a member of the UN.
Professor, if you feel so strongly, then why does Zelensky have to say, please prove that you're with us? Why?
It's a valid point.
He's saying,
and I'm not endorsing.
You've not even implemented a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
I agree with you. I agree with you that Zelensky, I think, has a point. But our system is a president who's accountable. Unlike Russia, for example, or China, the president's accountable to the people and accountable to the Congress and to the Senate. So he is trying to put forward the best policy that he can. I mean, he's saying that NATO is a red line. Maybe he didn't do enough. Zelensky's asking for a no-fly zone. There are a lot of complexities here. But is it possible that the world can stand by, including the international institutions, while while planes are bombing maternity wards. You have it right here in your screen showing what's going on here. I mean, this is obvious. There is no excuse, even under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which is opening a proceeding. It's very, very clear that if you target civilians, that is defined as a crime against humanity. I didn't make it up. I didn't say it. Our ambassador to the United Nations said it. And I endorse what American position is. Now, America's position is not perfect. You're trying to, to bring up points about America and all of this. Yes, well, but on this one, Europe and America are united in their feeling about this point, and that Ukraine is the victim of aggression. And if you can't see it,
Europe and America are not united. Europe and America are not united. You are united in spirit. I'll tell you one thing, sir. I'll tell you one thing. I disagree with you only for the reason that Europe and America are united maybe in spirit, but not in reality. Bohdan, I'm coming to you in the European Parliament yesterday, European Union. They just said that it's time we have our own security framework. They've said it as clearly as that. I'd like, yes, Bohdan, limited time. Bohdan, and then Dove. Dove has been waiting as well. Dove, yeah, extending this a little bit, few minutes.
Well, you weren't really listening. First, we want to know how India voted, but you weren't really listening yesterday because the EU speeded up Ukraine's possible accession by making it a candidate member. That was a gigantic leap forward. It also described Ukraine as the torchbearer of freedom. Now, Zelensky's gripe is that Ukraine has been asking for weapons, defensive weapons, for many years. And NATO countries, despite what the traitors in Moscow say, NATO wasn't giving those weapons. At the very last stage, in the last week, it's given javelins and some other weapons. And thank God the Turks have sold their equipment to us. But am I being jammed? Can I hear it? The thing is that Ukraine wanted to be a member of NATO, and it wasn't allowed in. So it's not America manipulating things or Brussels manipulating things. Unfortunately, the realization in Europe and Washington has come late in the day that we're dealing with a tyrant and maybe a crazy man, a madman, a Hitler, Nero, a Caligula sitting in Moscow. And that is the danger for the world. And Ukraine is on the front line of that fight, not only for democracy and decency, keeping a madman at bay, because we don't know what he's going to do tomorrow. This is it. He's not a rational player. And your propagandist there, a so-called, I don't know, an American traitor.
Mark Sleboda are you referring to? Please you don't have to be personal with him. You can refer to him, yes.
No, I don't have any respect
I'm equally
for traitors.
concerned about
Goebbels. We had in London during World War II, Lord Balfour. He was working for Hitler. Ho, 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 Hitler is right. And these Marxist opponents who get great money who are parroting the Putin line, even at this time when immense war crimes are being committed. How dare you, sir, even speak as some kind of rational, civilized human being? You're an accomplice to murder. You're a murderer. Okay, look at yourself in the mirror tonight and say, I am a murderer, but I get good money, so I will say what I want. Go back to America and face your people and your government and tell them that Putin is a good guy. I hope they lynch you.
You can't ask for personal violence. There's no need for that. We can all make our points. We pretend that we don't have disagreements tonight, Bohdan. Of course, there are disagreements, but since you said so much about him, I think I can give him a chance to rebut.
What would Jews have said to Hitler? What would Jews have said to Hitler when the Holocaust was happening? Why should he get a chance? What would the Jews have said to Hitler? What would you Indians have said to the British when they were putting you in black holes during the period of imperialism? Were you clapping them and saying, let's give them a fair say? You would say, get out of here, you scum, you imperialist bastards. That's what you would say. And yet you give like this propagandists. You've had him on your show many times. I'm ashamed of you. Get a Democrat. Get Navalny on your show. Get Navalny on your show, or one of his people. Give us the voice of real Russia, the other Russia, not Putin's Russia. I think that's clear to you. You're a
Thank you, sir.
journalist. Why are you dealing with propagandists? Get a real Russian. Get a real Russian to speak when.
I'll remain focused on the subject, sir. And please allow me to do so. Because if I take away from the subject, it's not going to help. So I sincerely request here. Sincerely request that we stay limited to that. Mark has a right to rebut. Right, has a right to rebut. I'm asking questions on all sides. My questions are not meant to please anyone. My concern is, and I want to bring in Dove and Mark. My concern is that we are dealing with an irrational situation. My only concern is escalation. To a point where we won't be discussing this anymore. We may grieve the moment that we didn't give a chance for de-escalation. That's my genuine concern. Because if Putin wants a victory desperately, aren't you concerned, Dove, how far he may go? What he may do?
Look, Arnab, you're right. This could go very far. And I think that one of the reasons that we have not gone to a no-fly zone is something that you raised in one of the previous shows I was on, which was you don't want a World War III. You don't want American aircraft and Russian aircraft shooting at each other. What we are doing, and I think your case about the separation between Europe and the United States is a little off base because, frankly, the Europeans are trying to build up a parallel capability to support a NATO together. If you look even at Italy, it reversed itself despite its close ties to Russia. The entire European Union has been choking Russia economically every bit as much as we have. And it's not just Europe and us. 141 countries in the world see that Vladimir Putin is an aggressor. It's not just Europe. It's not just America. It's not just blue-eyed white men, as you put it. It's the entire world. 5 countries, that's it, oppose the resolution. That should tell you something. What we are doing in the United States, and I am a Republican, and I'm a proud Republican. I do not normally support Democrats. And what President Biden said last night, I 100% support. As Professor Mark pointed out, every single person in that hall, Republicans and Democrats, stood up and supported Ukraine. Now, if there are Americans who don't support Ukraine and they support Russia, well, we are a democracy, and if you want to be an idiot, it's your privilege. However, our entire political leadership, no matter what we argue about, and boy, do we argue a lot, supports Ukraine. And I think that's something that's important. The entire American leadership, the entire European leadership, 141 nations in the world, everyone understands that Putin is clearly a war criminal and nothing else.
What do you lose if the war continues? Answer that question, Dove.
May I say
the moral
something?
position I
What's
understand.
lost and what's gained? Yes. Okay. In the interim, Russia wants to get control of Ukraine. It needs to build its forces. Ukraine wants to get weapons. It wants to get supplies that have been promised. So it's a holding action. Both sides are holding. There is no real incentive to get a truce at this. Well, truce, yes, but the Russians aren't going to pull out. The Ukrainians aren't going to give in. The Russians are waiting to bolster their forces. The Ukrainians are waiting for the sanctions to have an impact and for the Russian public to come out on the streets and hopefully for a palace revolution, for a Praetorian Guard to put an end to this mad Caligula or Nero. That's what's at stake now. So, let's be realistic about this and talk about what the realities are on the ground. The Russians are not going to pull out. The Ukrainians are not going to give in.
Briefly to Hussein and to Elizabeth. Should we then be reconciled that this is going to stretch? No, should we be reconciled, Hussein, that it's going to stretch? And tell me the biggest risk, Hussein, of this stretching and not ending.
I don't hear anything. I don't hear.
Yes.
What is the biggest risk of this stretching indefinitely almost? Hussein, that was first to you and then to Elizabeth. What is the biggest risk of this stretching, not into a few days, but into a few more weeks?
Well, it's if you're talking about a few weeks, I think you're being optimistic because it could stretch much farther still. But in a few weeks scenario, it would obviously continue to be a humanitarian disaster for Ukraine, but also for Russia. We should remember that Russia is now being cut off from the rest of the world. Shipping companies are no longer sailing to Russia, which means that Russia can only receive will only receive emergency supplies, food and medicines. International shipping companies are not going to send anything, are not going to deliver anything else in Russia. Only Chinese, the 5 largest shipping companies are no longer sailing to Russia. Then we should also remember that as a result of all of this, global shipping is being thrown into turmoil, and they may seem like a small issue, but shipping transports 90% of everything that we use. So that means that we, ordinary citizens around the world, including citizens of developing countries that import a lot of grain from Ukraine in particular, are going to see food shortages. So this is the tragedy here is first and foremost in Ukraine and the immediate region. And we should remember that neighboring countries are receiving a lot of refugees, but it will turn into a global tragedy, chaos, the longer the conflict goes on.
That's my concern. Hussein, your take on that, please. If this stretches almost indefinitely, could this become multilateral more directly?
I can predict that some years can be what we are talking about. So this conflict can stretch to some years. There is a potential of civilian resistance in the cities, which will prolong this process. The costs of civilian lives will increase. Ukrainian state, the entire country will be destroyed by this conflict. So some cities will be beyond repair. And we are talking about regional and global costs in economy beyond the humanitarian crisis. The long years of impact this conflict we will talk about is now prolonging at the moment, and we have to think about the repercussions already at this point. Now, in terms of economics, I believe the countries will fit into the new scheme. It will take time until they can re-regulate their energy resources, multiply their providers, and outcasting Russia from the energy market will be certainly costly, but it is manageable. It will take some time. Once this takes place, I believe Russia will be more tamed and more controlled in terms of aggression. And certainly what I wanted to emphasize is that we are talking about a systemic shake in global politics. The result and the way this conflict prolongs will determine if we are transiting into a new system, global balances of power, or we are continuing with a crippling one, which has been going on since the end of the Cold War.
Well, it's going to have a very long-term impact. I think it's not going to be an immediate alignment or a realignment. I think that will take a long time, but yes, well, global equations will never be the same again.